The room buzzed with energy as journalists packed into the brightly lit conference hall. Cameras flashed, capturing every micro-expression on Elon Musk's face as he stood at the podium. Dressed in a sharp black jacket and a t-shirt with a cryptic graphic, he exuded his trademark blend of confidence and eccentricity. He had just finished a detailed explanation about SpaceX's latest advancements, something about Mars colonization and interplanetary internet, but the audience wasn't entirely there for the technical talk. They wanted a glimpse into the mind of the man behind the innovations. Barron adjusted his tie nervously, gripping his notepad. As a relatively new journalist, this was his first time covering someone as high-profile as Elon Musk. He had spent days rehearsing potential questions, but now, seated among a crowd of seasoned reporters, he wasn't sure any of them were bold enough. Around him, questions fired off like bullets. "Mr. Musk, can you elaborate on the projected timeline for Starship's next launch? Elon, is Neuralink closer to human trials? What are your thoughts on recent criticisms about Tesla's supply chain sustainability?" Elon answered each question with a mix of precision and wit, his tone effortlessly disarming the occasional skeptic in the crowd. Barron scribbled notes furiously, though his nerves still held him back from raising his hand. Then, a voice broke through the usual stream of technical queries. "Elon," called out a woman near the front, her tone playful but pointed, "we've seen you give your children some pretty unique names. XAEA-12, for example. So, what will you name your next child?" The room fell silent for a beat, and then a ripple of laughter broke out. Even the sternest reporters couldn't help but smirk at the question. Elon paused, leaning slightly on the podium. His expression was unreadable at first, but then the corners of his mouth twitched into a sly smile. "Ah," he said, dragging out the sound as if savoring the attention. "You know, I've been thinking about that." The laughter grew louder, mingled with murmurs of anticipation. Elon's pauses were always deliberate, designed to build suspense. This time, he continued, his eyes scanning the room, "I'm considering open source." The laughter exploded into full-blown chuckles and guffaws. Some of the journalists shook their heads, jotting the quip down for their light-hearted end-of-day pieces. To them, it was another example of Musk's oddball humor, a headline generator as reliable as his rocket launches. But Barron didn't laugh. Instead, he frowned slightly, his pen hovering above his notebook. He replayed the words in his head, "open source." It wasn't just a joke, was it? Elon had delivered the line with a glimmer of something deeper in his eyes, a challenge, maybe, or an invitation. Before Barron could overthink it, Elon moved on, answering the next question about renewable rocket fuel. The moment had passed for most of the room, but not for Barron. His instincts whispered that there was more to unpack here. As the conference wrapped up and the crowd began to disperse, Barron closed his notebook and lingered in his seat. Elon's words echoed in his mind like a code waiting to be deciphered. "Open source," he muttered to himself. What could it mean? The glow of Barron's laptop lit up the dark corner of his apartment, a stark contrast to the faint city lights flickering through the window. He hadn't even bothered to change out of his suit. Elon's words, "open source," played on repeat in his head. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the search results on his screen. Open source philosophy. Open source software. Open collaboration. The phrase had originated in technology, describing software where the source code was freely shared and modified by anyone. It was about transparency, collaboration, and endless improvement. But Elon wasn't just talking about software, was he? He clicked on a blog post about the principles of open source. Words like freedom, accessibility, and community-driven innovation stood out. He imagined Elon seeing the world as one giant open-source project, humanity itself a system that could evolve if people stopped hoarding ideas and started building together. Barron opened a blank document and began typing furiously. Elon Musk doesn't just create rockets and electric cars. He creates paradigms. What if his philosophy isn't just about technology but about how humanity could thrive? Could open source be the key to unlocking a new era of collaboration and progress? But as he typed, he felt a pang of doubt. Was he reading too much into a throwaway comment? He opened Elon's Twitter feed, scrolling past memes, updates about Tesla, and retweets of obscure scientific articles. Then he found it, a tweet posted just an hour ago. Imagine if humans were like open source, limitless. Barron's heart skipped. He knew it wasn't a coincidence. The tweet was cryptic, but it was confirmation that Elon's comment at the press conference wasn't just a joke. He bookmarked the tweet and sat back, his mind racing. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became. Elon wasn't just being clever, he was challenging people to rethink how they lived, worked, and connected. Barron decided he needed more. More insight, more context, something beyond online articles and cryptic tweets. The conference hall buzzed with excitement as people shuffled between tech booths, marveling at the latest innovations on display. Barron tightened the strap of his bag and scanned the room. This wasn't just any tech event, it was one where Elon Musk himself was expected to speak. Barron had managed to secure a ticket last minute, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man whose words had consumed his thoughts for days. He wandered between panels and exhibits, trying to quell his nervous energy. The schedule indicated Elon's keynote would start in an hour. Barron rehearsed in his head what he might say if he got the chance to ask Elon directly about open source. But as the minutes ticked by, he began to doubt he'd get anywhere near the man. Deciding to grab a coffee to settle his nerves, Barron made his way to a quieter hallway. He turned the corner, and froze. There, standing alone near a side exit, was Elon Musk. He wasn't flanked by security or surrounded by fans. He was just casually scrolling through his phone, as if the world around him didn't exist. Barron's heart raced. This was it. His chance. Before he could overthink it, he stepped forward. "Mr. Musk?" His voice came out steadier than he'd expected. Elon looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Yes? I'm Barron. I'm a journalist." He hesitated, then added, "I was at the press conference earlier this week. You said something about naming your next child open source. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Elon's lips curled into a small smile, but he didn't interrupt. "I think it's more than just a name," Barron continued, his confidence growing. "It feels like a philosophy, a way of seeing the world. Am I right?" Elon tucked his phone into his pocket, folding his arms. "Interesting interpretation," he said, his tone measured. "What do you think it means?" Barron hesitated. "I think, you're talking about humanity. About how we could share knowledge, collaborate, and evolve without limits if we stopped being so closed off." Elon's smile widened. "Not bad," he said, nodding slightly. "But it's not just about sharing knowledge. It's about trust. Transparency. The idea that the best solutions come when no one's trying to hoard the answers." Barron's mind raced to keep up. "So, you're saying we need to live like open-source software? No secrets, no egos, just pure collaboration?" Elon chuckled. "Something like that." Before Barron could ask another question, a staff member appeared, gesturing for Elon to return to the main hall. Elon glanced at Barron one last time. "Expand your mind," he said, then turned and walked away. Barron stood frozen, his thoughts a whirlwind. Expand his mind? The phrase felt like both a challenge and an invitation. He realized Elon hadn't just answered his question, he'd given him something to pursue. A philosophy to explore. As the crowd swallowed Elon back into the event, Barron clutched his notebook tightly. This wasn't just about a name anymore. It was about a way of thinking, and he knew he had to dig deeper. Barron sat at his desk, staring out at the city skyline. The conversation with Elon replayed in his mind, looping endlessly. His apartment, normally a haven of focus, now felt suffocating. The idea of living like open source tugged at him, demanding attention. What did it mean to live transparently? To collaborate without fear? He glanced at his laptop, where dozens of unfinished articles and abandoned projects cluttered his desktop. Each file represented an idea he had been too afraid to share, too worried it wasn't perfect enough or that someone else would steal it. He opened one of the drafts, a story he had started years ago about the ethics of AI development. It had been promising, but he'd shelved it after convincing himself it wouldn't make an impact. Now, reading through it, he saw flashes of potential he hadn't noticed before. What if he had shared it back then? Would someone else have built on it? Barron closed the file and leaned back, his thoughts spiraling. For years, he had treated his ideas like treasures to guard, not seeds to plant. Elon's words had cracked something open in him, and now, everything felt different. The sharp buzz of his phone jolted him out of his reverie. It was a text from an old college friend, Jack, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey Barron, weird question, are you still interested in writing about AI? I'm working on something and could use your perspective." Barron stared at the message, his chest tightening. Jack had reached out a few years ago with a similar offer, but Barron had brushed him off, afraid of being overshadowed. He had told himself it wasn't the right time, but now he saw the truth. He had been afraid to collaborate, afraid to share. Without overthinking, Barron typed back. "Yes. Let's talk." For the first time in years, he felt a weight lift. He didn't have to do this alone. The Tesla event was packed with energy, the kind that made the air buzz and hum. A massive stage stood at the center of the room, glowing with sleek lights and Tesla's signature red and white branding. People murmured in anticipation as the clock ticked down to Elon Musk's presentation. Barron stood near the back, notebook in hand, still processing his conversation with Jack earlier that week. They had brainstormed for hours, bouncing ideas in a way that felt effortless and energizing. For the first time, Barron had experienced the power of true collaboration. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted in applause as Elon Musk walked onto the stage. He started with updates about Tesla's latest innovations, new battery technology, sustainable energy solutions, but Barron could sense that something else was coming. Elon's tone shifted near the end, a playful glint in his eyes. "Now," Elon said, pausing for effect, "before I let you all go, I have one more announcement." The crowd hushed, leaning in. "As some of you might remember, I was recently asked what I would name my next child. At the time, I mentioned I was considering open source." A wave of laughter rippled through the audience, but Elon held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "Let me explain," he said, his voice steady and deliberate. "Names are more than labels. They're a reflection of values, of ideas. And as I thought more about it, I realized that the name I've chosen represents a philosophy I believe in deeply, a vision for how humanity can thrive." The screen behind him lit up with two words in bold, minimalist font. Open.Humanity. The room was silent, the weight of the name settling over the audience. Elon continued, his tone unwavering. "This name symbolizes the potential of collaboration, transparency, and shared progress. It's about recognizing that our greatest innovations come when we work together, when we make our knowledge and resources accessible to everyone. It's about humanity as an open-source project, constantly evolving, improving, and breaking barriers." The crowd erupted into applause, but Barron stood frozen. The name wasn't just clever, it was profound. It encapsulated everything Elon had hinted at in their brief conversation. As the applause died down, Elon closed with a final remark. Open.Humanity isn't just a name. It's a call to action. To build a future where no idea is locked away, where progress is a shared endeavor. And I hope all of you will take part. Barron felt a lump rise in his throat. The message resonated deeply, not just as a journalist but as a person who had spent years guarding his own ideas out of fear. Elon had turned a single name into a manifesto, a vision for a better world. As the event ended and people began filing out, Barron stayed rooted to his spot, the words Open.Humanity blazing in his mind. This was more than a story, it was a movement. And he was ready to be part of it. The soft click of Barron's keyboard filled the quiet of his apartment. The words poured out of him like a flood, unrestrained for the first time in years. His article wasn't just a recap of Elon Musk's announcement, it was a deeply personal reflection on what it meant to live by the principles of Open.Humanity. He wrote about his journey, the cryptic comment at the press conference, his obsessive research, the brief but transformative conversation with Elon, and the profound changes he had made in his own mindset. He detailed how the open-source philosophy had pushed him to confront his fears and embrace collaboration, not just in his career, but in his life. For years, I guarded my ideas like treasure, fearing that sharing them would diminish their value. But what I've learned is the opposite, ideas only grow when they're shared. Open.Humanity isn't just a name, it's a blueprint for a better world, one where progress is fueled by trust, transparency, and shared purpose. Barron leaned back, rereading the final paragraph. It was raw, honest, and far more vulnerable than anything he'd ever published before. A part of him still hesitated. What if no one understood? What if they ridiculed him for overanalyzing a name? But then he thought of Elon's parting words, expand your mind. With a deep breath, he clicked publish. The article quickly gained traction, spreading across social media and tech forums. Messages poured into his inbox, some skeptical, some curious, but many deeply moved. People shared their own stories of holding back out of fear and how they were inspired to embrace a more open mindset. Late that night, Barron received a brief email from Elon Musk. Subject: well done. You've understood. Now act on it. Barron stared at the screen, a grin spreading across his face. The message was short, but it carried immense weight. Elon had given him both validation and a challenge to keep moving forward. For the first time in years, Barron felt like he was truly part of something bigger. Months passed, and Barron found himself sitting at the table of a bustling co-working space, surrounded by a group of people he never would have met if not for the article. Engineers, writers, educators, and designers, all inspired by the philosophy of Open.Humanity. Their project was ambitious, an open-source platform designed to connect people across the globe to collaborate on solving real-world problems, from climate change to education inequality. Barron wasn't just writing about the movement anymore, he was living it. "All right," Jack said, sliding a notebook across the table. "We've got a dozen submissions for the clean energy project. Let's start reviewing." Barron nodded, picking up the notebook. The energy in the room was electric, fueled by the collective passion of people who believed in a shared future. As the team worked, Barron glanced at the large whiteboard on the wall. At the top, someone had written a simple mantra: ideas are limitless when we share them. The words brought a rush of clarity. This was what Elon had been talking about, not just a name, not just a philosophy, but a movement to change the way humanity approached progress. Later that evening, Barron stepped outside, the cool night air refreshing after hours of collaboration. He looked up at the stars, imagining the infinite possibilities that lay ahead, not just for him, but for everyone willing to embrace the idea of Open.Humanity. For the first time, he felt free.